Many will be asking what happens to a member of the military when their plane is downed and what's happening behind the scenes to bring them home. Well, someone who knows the situation all too well is the former RAF pilot John Peters. Now, back in 1991, his plane was hit. He was forced to eject over enemy territory along with his navigator, John Nichol. The pair were captured by Saddam Hussein's forces, tortured and paraded on television. Images you may well remember. They were beamed around the world. Well, I'm pleased to say John Peters joins us now to take us through what happens in these high-stakes situations. Great pleasure, John, to have you on the programme. I think you'll know as well that your friend and former colleague, Sean Bell, is in the studio with me as well, so he'll also be participating in the interview. I'd like to start by asking you, John, what goes through your mind when you know that there is no option other than to eject over enemy territory?
To be honest, I think like any other fighter pilot, it's a trained response. You've done that hundreds of times in your career. In the simulator, you fly an aircraft, they give you emergencies, you respond to the emergency, and you eject. The difference in war is the fact that, you know, the engine fire that you get in a simulator is you've actually been hit by a missile and the aircraft rotated. You have anti-aircraft guns and you are surrounded by orange flame. So that is the difference in reality to simulation.
Yeah, and I suppose also, and Sean is going to come in on this in a moment, also you must be a bit dazed, right? Having been through that, having ejected out of your plane, when you land in enemy territory, is everything a little bit confusing at the outset?
Yes, obviously. I mean, you've just gone through an extreme event. I mean, you've been shot out of the sky, you've then ejected, and I had 2 crushed vertebrae from the ejection, and we ejected at 320 feet, so above the ground, so I was in the parachute for 10 seconds. You're then on the ground, and you've gone from a position of power, effectively, and just like this poor American crew, you've gone from a position of power of, you know, this huge air power and involvement in that, to literally John and I, 2 little pink bodies in the desert, you know, and you suddenly, I think the transition is just shocking. And the first thing we did was giggle. It was really pathetic, actually, because you think, what the hell do we do now?
John, you and I both went through flying training together. We did a lot of conduct after capture training, escape and evasion training, but actually, I've only ejected, I've not done what you've done, but it's completely different when it happens for real. Can you talk us through that moment in the cockpit when you had to make the decision to get out? Because when you and I have talked about this, it sounds surreal how you make that decision and how that whole process goes.
Well, it's defined by the moment. I mean, when we got hit by the missile, the aircraft rotated a couple of times, and we were only 50, 60 feet above the ground, doing about 500-600 knots at the time. Then the anti-aircraft guns, and it's a trained response. You're trying to solve problems. But when the aircraft, literally, I couldn't see the back of my aircraft. It was completely orange flame. It was about 15 feet donut around my aircraft, a completely orange flame. I couldn't see my right-hand wing. And so then you do click into, again, a trained response. I know this sounds boring, but this is why we're trained so much, that you go, we now have to eject because this aircraft is just going to disintegrate around us. So you then go through the checks to eject, and that's when you eject. Now, that's the first time, as you'll remember, you never eject in practice. So, but you have complete faith that you pull that handle and you'll be out the aircraft. And that is how it is. I think the big thing then, once you're on the ground, you have that initial shock where we giggled. You then literally, again, it's training. And again, I don't want to sound too boring, but you end up you put the next cassette in, which is, we now need to evade. And that is exactly what this crew will be doing now.
So going to the crew now, one of them's been plucked away. What do you think is going through the mind of the individual? We don't know if it's male or female. You know, what's going through the mind, and what happens next, do you think?
Well, much of it will be the training, and I won't go into what we get taught. And do remember, my experience is 35 years ago, and the sophistication will have increased. But the sophistication has increased on both sides, so the stakes are the same, really. And it is a game of cat and mouse. The US forces have got to find their colleagues, and they'll have the combat search and rescue squadron is effectively who will do that and plan how to get that person out, because as you can imagine, the Iranians will be saturating the area as best they can, because this is now a political game, because that gives them huge leverage.
And John, talk us through what happened with you, because you and John Nichol, after you ejected, you said that initially you giggled when you landed, but you were quite quickly captured, weren't you? What then happened?
Well, I was on the ground and I was a bit dazed. John landed about 100 metres away from me. He wandered across, picked up the parachute. I was a bit dazed from the ejection. And he said, why we giggled? He said, well, looked around holding his parachute, well, this will be the Iraqi desert then. And you go, it was beyond pathetic, actually. But that's when you click in. We started to make our plans of what we were going to do. But we were on the ground for about 2 hours when about 20 Iraqi soldiers found us. And they're just spread out in front of you with 20 Kalashnikov machine guns, and we've only got 2 little pistols. And they started, basically, they buried us in the sand by machine gun fire. I mean, it was just to survive that. The very first bullet, we were lying in the sand, nothing behind to hide behind, and the very first bullet bounced, inches from my head, and then that was followed up by hundreds of bullets as we were basically buried in the sand by machine gun fire, until eventually they got to us, because we were trying to give ourselves up, but they were scared of us as well. And they got to us and beat us up.
And you were paraded, weren't you, on Iraqi state media? There are images that people around the world will remember. Tell us about that, if you will. What was expected of you, what they wanted to know from you, what they wanted to achieve with putting you on television.
Well, this is where I'm going to be very circumspect, as you can imagine, with there is a aircrew in evading at this moment. So basically I was taken off to Baghdad. I was in an interrogation centre, and the first week you are interrogated, and they want military information. Any military person is not prepared to give it, so they obviously apply violence and a lot of psychological pressure and sleep deprivation and all the things that you can see in any movie to try and get you to speak.
John, remember at that time, remember you and I chatting about this, when you were paraded, one of the things you said was that you were expecting to die, but at least if you were paraded, you knew that people at home would know you were alive. Your family, all your colleagues were clearly, including myself, were very worried about that time. How much did you think about the family, or how much was it literally just focused on your own survival?
In reality, it's, I'm going to quote Admiral Stockdale, who was a Vietnam prisoner of war. It's called the Stockdale paradox. They said, how did you survive? He survived about 7 years in captivity, being tortured throughout his time. And he said it's paradoxical. You've got to deal with it's balancing the brutal reality with enduring hope. You have to deal with the brutal reality of being in that environment where your whole world is violence. But if you believe that was the rest of your life, as in this degradation and violence and pain, you'd give up. So you have to, the balance is, enduring hope is you hope to be back home with those you love. But when you put yourself in that mindset, it makes you soft, if you understand that, because we're all soft with the people we love, and that makes you weak. So you've got to, my word is flip-flop between the two mentally to gain strength, but very much touch and bounce back into the brutal reality. And that's the balance. But it depends when. During the actual beatings and the interrogation, you've got to be focused on not submitting to their will.
And do you think that the military operation, what hopes do you have for the military operation to extract? Because you and I both know the Americans have a very comprehensive combat search and rescue capability, but it's not easy, is it? And the aircraft have evolved. As time goes on, what do you think the prospects are for that downed aircrew?
Well, now this is just a game of probability and cat and mouse. You're right, the Americans are unbelievably good at combat search and rescue and have huge resources behind it because, for the very conversations you've been having this morning, a downed aircrew member, it gives political leverage. But the Iranians, it's their land, they know their land, and that is, I'm trying to be making sure that I don't... It's a very contained moment in a very constricted space, however big the country is. And for the individual, you're going from a world event down to an individual event, and that's the pressure that individual has now.
John, when you did eventually make it back home, were you surprised that you and your navigator, John Nichol, you'd effectively become household names and that there were people who knew your faces all over the world?
Yeah, I'm a moral obscenity. I reinforce every worst stereotype of war. I came back and was fated. I had friends who died in war. And actually, from my perspective now, no one ever talks about, the minimum 100,000 Iraqis who died in war. War is not to be entered lightly. And individuals suffer for it, and countries suffer for it. So, yes, I'm very aware. It's because back in the day we didn't have social media, and it was the first live televised war. So I can't really escape this image. Here I am talking to you 35 years after an event in my life, and yet I'm still asked to go on television.
Yeah, and what I wanted to finish by asking you is does being a prisoner of war ever leave you?
Yeah, yes, I have not lost one wink of sleep from my prisoner of war experience. My only thoughts at the moment is more for that current aircrew, because they will be very aware of what they need to do, and hopefully they will put in their training to good use and be extracted. So that's my hope for them, but also for their families. For me, Helen, my wife, had our two children at the time. They were 2 and my daughter was 6 weeks old when I went to war, because you're that age when you are aircrew. And so my thoughts are, 1, with the individual, 2, with the squadron members, because it certainly affects your friends within the Air Force, but also their families. So that's where my mind is on them. As a prisoner of war, you're then just playing with fate.